Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Emily and today we are talking about my 10 favorite books of 2019. In total, I ended up reading 82 books over the course of the year, and there were some really incredible ones and some that were not so great and I didn't love so much, but choosing a top 10 is always really exciting and always feels like weirdly a lot of pressure. But this year I feel really good about my top 10, and there are definitely ones that have stuck with me throughout the year and will do so into the future, I'm sure. It's a pretty good spread of different genres too, which I feel great about, and some of them I read early on in the year. One of them is the last book I read in 2019, and just in general, I feel like it's a pretty diverse selection. So without any more rambling, I'm just going to dive into my top 10 books, starting with number 10. So number 10 is The Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon. This is a epic fantasy story. It's, well, I don't know if it is classified as epic, but it's long. It's the longest book I read all year, and I want to say it's close to 900 pages, if not more. And it is about a world that has lots of magic, where dragons are gods and also feared depending on which part of the world you're in. There's a lot of drama politically, and then also within the royalty system and all the different monarchs and leaders that they have throughout the world. You follow 4 different points of view, and each of the characters come from sort of a different part of this vast world and give you a really different look at what this world's all about. For example, one of the characters is a dragon rider, and one of the other characters lives in a kingdom where dragons are like the ultimate enemy and feared above all else. I buddy read this with 2 of my friends, Jocelyn from Mejia with a Book and Spencer from Common Spence, who I just really love a whole lot, and this was such a good buddy reading experience for us. We all really enjoyed it. This book ended up for me getting 4.5 stars just because I didn't love the ending, but it's ending up on my top 10 list despite having other 5-star reads that didn't make it on here, because not only did I really love the story except for the end, but also it was just such a pleasure to read it with those 2, and we had so much fun. And it also has one of my favorite relationships of all time. And yeah, I loved it so much, and don't let its size intimidate you. It really didn't take us that long to get through, and in reality I think all of us were able to read more than we had originally allotted per day because we were so excited to know what was happening next. But yes, highly recommend. For me, it lived up to the hype, and I would definitely read more from Samantha Shannon in the future. Next up is one that is on so many other people's lists, and that is Red, White, and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston. This is a story following the first son of the United States, Alex, and the Prince of Wales, Henry, and they get into a little bit of a PR nightmare. They are seen kind of squabbling and not getting on very well, and so as a way to remedy it, the White House and the royal family decides that they're gonna kind of put on a show of Alex and Henry hanging out and being friends to kind of try to smooth things over. And as you would expect, they fall for each other, and it's a romance between the 2 of them. Not only is it just really sweet and really authentic and so well done, but it also, like many other people have said, is a great escape from the current political world and climate. This is an alternate future where the president after Obama is a woman, and she is really badass. She is a lot of fun to read about, and in general it just made me feel better about the world. It also made me a little bit like, oh, what could have been. But in the end, it's just such a delightful story. It's really funny too, and I think it just does a really good job connecting to who, millennials are today. It felt very authentic, and I am so excited for Casey McQuiston's next book, which is coming out in 2021, I believe, but whatever they write, I will pick up. Next on my list at number 8 is Eleanor Olaf is Completely Fine by Gail Honeyman. This is an adult contemporary fiction story about a woman, Eleanor Olaf, who is living in England, and she just has kind of a lonely life, but she never really confronts that, I guess, or doesn't really recognize it. Just kind of goes about her routine. She has, her schedule, she has what she does laid out, and she just kind of knows what the days are going to look like. And she thinks that's completely fine, but she meets a friend from work who kind of helps to show her that, maybe her life could be a little bit different. He kind of opens her up to some new experiences and things and just helps her kind of look at her own mental health as well. The ending, the sort of like twist towards the end was very heart-wrenching. I was laughing throughout this book, cried. Eleanor really at the beginning is just not a good person. She's not great to read about. She makes you really frustrated, and I don't know, but you come to love her and care for her so much, or at least I did. I thought Gail Honeyman did a really good job crafting this character. I think she was really intentional about it. I just remember finishing this and feeling like my emotions had been all over the place. And after I read a book like that, I just know it has to be on a favorites list, because for a book to make me feel so many different things in just like 300 pages, a little over 300 pages, is, I don't know, it means something. At number 7, we have We Set the Dark on Fire by Tehlor K. Mejia. This is a fantasy story. It's the first in a duology. The second one is coming out later in 2020. I expected I would really like this. It was recommended to me by Jocelyn. I actually bought it when I was in New York City for BookCon. Spencer and I went to visit Jocelyn at the bookstore she works at, and we each bought a book from her, and I think both of us bought like favorites of hers, and this was the one I picked out because I'd heard her rave about it. This book takes place in a world that isn't quite fantasy, isn't quite dystopian. I don't really know how to classify it, but there's this school, the Mejia School for Girls, and women who attend the school become one of 2 different roles, a primera or a segunda, and essentially each prominent, powerful man in the society gets one of each. He gets 2 wives. One is kind of his voice of reason, his confidant, the person who like strategizes with him in making big decisions. The other is, beautiful. She cooks, she raises the children, she's his lover. So it's 2 very different roles. Our 2 main characters, the primera and the segunda, were enemies, rivals in school, and they both get assigned, I guess, to the same man. And from there, they fall in love. Yeah, so this man's 2 wives, instead of loving him, love each other. And it's all about just like rebellion and power. And there's also a lot of commentary on immigration. And this is a Latinx world, and there's a lot of Spanish and Latinx culture woven into it as well, which is really beautiful and so well done. But at the end of the day, it's just about women taking control of their lives and trying to do their small part to change things. And I cannot wait for the sequel. I just love this one with every fiber of my being. I could not get enough of it. And I feel like it's been highly underread this year. Like I went on Goodreads and only a few of my friends had either read it or marked it as to be read, so get on it. Next up, in number 6 spot, I have A Million Junes by Emily Henry. This is a story about, it's kind of, I don't know if it actually is, but it's sort of a Romeo and Juliet retelling. Our main character is from the O'Donnell family, and they have had a rivalry with the Angert family as long as they can remember. And there's this old feud that goes back several generations, and so June has grown up always being told to stay away from the Angerts, and Saul, the son who is about her age. It is about their, kind of rebellious relationship, but also it's about family and secrets and stories that are passed down and legacies, and I don't know, it's sort of magical realism, sort of fantastical. It definitely is one that took me by surprise because I don't typically love magical realism, which is really funny considering I actually have 2 magical realism books in my top 10 this year. So I was a little hesitant going into it, but my sister loved it, and so I was like, all right, I gotta give it a chance. It ended up just being so much more than I was expecting, but totally perfect for what I was hoping for. And I loved June and Saul and that relationship, and just them discovering not only about their families but about themselves, and just taking the time to listen to others and not just kind of go off of what you've always been taught, but really make decisions for yourselves and form your own opinions. I know I'm a little late to the game on Emily Henry, and I haven't read her other book yet, but I'm definitely hoping to pick it up in 2020 because this one was just everything I wanted it to be, and it was so good, and I loved it so much. Now heading into my top 5, and the number 5 spot is In an Absent Dream by Shannon McGuire. This is the 4th book in the Wayward Children series, which is one of my favorite series of all time. It's a series of novellas. They're all pretty short. I think this is actually the longest one. And the first book is all about this home for wayward children, and essentially, it's these children who have gone into portal fantasy worlds. These worlds that these kids find themselves in are just for them. Like it's their perfect world, and it's where they feel most at home. It's just something that like speaks to them, and where they feel seen. And so when they come back, often they're sort of like wrenched from this world, unexpectedly taken away, and they find themselves in this world that just doesn't live up to what they now are accustomed to. Each story or each book follows a different person or a different world, and this one is a lot about fair value and rules and worth, and just thinking about what you're giving versus what you're receiving, and vice versa. I don't know, it's hard to explain the concept. It was definitely a concept that sort of like went over my head in places. But at the end, I loved it so much. There's also an aspect of like sisterhood within this that I really loved, and it made me weep at the end. But I love all these books. They're all fantastic. The 5th one comes out in like 3 days. I have it pre-ordered, so it should be here on release day, and I cannot wait to read it. I think it's going to be another one that just like blows me out of the water, and I can't wait. I love Shannon McGuire's writing in these. It's so whimsical. It's so creative, and also super diverse. I know I've talked about this series a ton on my channel, so I feel like I'm just repeating myself at this point, but this one had to go on there. I love it so much. And number 4 is a mystery thriller, and that is The Turn of the Key by Ruth Ware. This is actually the last book that I read in 2019. I listened to the audiobook for this, and it was definitely, by far, obviously the best mystery I read this year. I read some pretty meh mystery thrillers. This one, I was like hooked. This is the story of our main character, Rowan, who gets a nannying job for a family in Scotland, sort of out of the city, sort of rural. She's taking care of these 3 young girls, and kind of finds herself just thrown into this in kind of a creepy house where a bunch of nannies have left the post, seemingly because they feel the house is haunted and that things are just kind of creepy or whatever. It was so creepy. It was one of those books that I couldn't listen to when I was home alone after dark. I thought Ruth Ware did such a good job building up the suspense. I truly had no idea what was going to happen at the end. I did guess one of the twists that was revealed a little bit more towards the middle, but at the end of the day, it's just one of those ones that the ending was nothing like what I was expecting, but it was great, and I thought it was really well done. I know a lot of other Ruth Ware books are a little bit more divisive. I feel like there are a lot of other Ruth Ware books that do not get a lot of hype. I do want to read more from her just because I'm curious. This was such a good mystery, and it really kept me on the edge of my seat the entire time, and I was sufficiently creeped out for most of it. Coming in at number 3 is Somersault by Katrina Leno. This is the other magical realism book that I have on my top 10, and I loved this so much. This is a story following our main character who lives on this island called By the Sea, and it's a very small community where everyone knows everyone, and our main character is part of like a family that's lived there for ages. Our main character has a twin sister, and the 2 of them are about to start their last summer on the island before they go off to college in the fall, and it will be the first time that they leave the island, and the first time a lot of their friends leave the island as well. The other thing about this community is every summer there's this bird that shows up that is a totally one-of-a-kind rare bird, and every summer ornithologists and bird experts and bird watchers from all over the world flock to the island, to see this bird. And the legend is that this bird is kind of the reincarnation of an ancestor of this family that our main character is from. I cannot remember her name for the life of me. Georgina. I would not have remembered that. So Georgina's family also, all these women possess sort of magical abilities, and they're all different, and they all show up at different times. So her sister Mary, her twin sister, has had her ability for ages, since they were little. Georgina's still waiting for hers to show up. She's a little ashamed about it, and she's also nervous that it's not going to happen before she turns 18 and before she leaves the island. So she's kind of waiting for that impatiently. And then this summer, the bird doesn't show up, and so everyone is very distraught over it and very upset, wondering where she is, what's happened to her, and it just causes a lot of mayhem on the island, and things start going wrong. This is hard to describe. It sounds super weird as I describe it. Really, it's about this community and about their bonds with each other. It's about Georgina and her sister. There's also a female-female relationship in this story that is really beautiful and quiet and slow burn, but really, really lovely. And it's also kind of about the nerves about leaving home for the first time and going away, and just that whole uncertainty. This one made me weep towards the end. I feel like I've said this about so many of these books, but I was so moved by it, particularly about Georgina and her relationship with her sister and her family in general. But it was just this magical and also sort of mysterious book that was not like a lot of action. It was pretty character driven, in such a good way. I thought the characters were so well done. I will definitely continue to read more Katrina Leno as she puts out books, because I thought she did such a beautiful job with these characters and with this story, and it was one that just like absolutely ripped my heart out in such a good way. Number 2 is the only science fiction on this list, and that is The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers. This is one that I've had on my TBR for years. It's such a well-known and well-loved science fiction story. It's more like hard sci-fi than I am used to, so I was super nervous going into it because I didn't know really what that would mean. This is about a spacecraft that is assigned or applies for and receives a really important and specialized job within the galaxy. The science super went over my head. I did not get a lot of the physics of it, but that's okay. This story is about, like I said, a spacecraft with all of these different individuals aboard, and it's humans and other alien species alike, all working together despite all of their differences, some language differences, just like in general, like they need different climates and they have different customs, and it was really, really interesting commentary on just how we deal with differences in society. There's also an AI character that plays a really big role and is a pretty main character, which I thought was super interesting. And one of the things that I loved about it, and what I thought Becky Chambers did such a good job with, is she wrote hard sci-fi, or sci-fi, it's definitely science fiction, but it was so accessible, and part of it is just like, so much of it is about relationships and just emotions and connection and wanting to be loved and wanting to love others and just a respect for those around you. And I loved it so much. I was really shocked, especially because at the beginning I felt like, what the hell am I reading? I have no concept of what these like physics terms are, and it felt very overwhelming. But once I got probably like 10% of the way through, it started to kind of just like, I could tune that out more or less. I didn't need to understand the physics of like black holes or like ripping holes in the universe or something. There's something to do with that. That's important. It's what's happening, and there's so much action involved around that. But for me, the characters and the relationships really made it, and I've been putting off reading the sequel, I think because I'm still intimidated somehow by this like science fiction aspect to it, but I just like, I need to get to it because I feel like it's gonna be just as good and I'm gonna love it so much, but it's intimidating. And then finally, my number 1 most favorite book of the year and one of my favorite books of all time is Daisy Jones and the Six by Tehlor Jenkins Reid. Oh my god, I love this book so much. It's a story about a fictional 70s rock band, and it's told in a very unique format that definitely does not work for everyone. This is a very polarizing book. Some people hate it, DNF it, can't get into it. And then I feel like a lot of people really loved it. It seems very divisive. It's either one or the other. But it's told in interview snippets. Someone is interviewing each member of the band several years in the future to kind of unfold and try to understand their breakup that was very abrupt and sudden and didn't really have any explanation. I liked that aspect of it actually because it gave so many voices, and I thought that was really interesting. One of the things I really liked that I think people really hated is that some of the characters like remembered things differently, and they had different points of view based on how they were observing these events or how they were involved, and that just is very like accurate. That's just going to happen in retelling accounts of what's happened in the past. Like, you're just going to have different memories, and I kind of liked that, and I liked that the sort of like, well, who's right? It doesn't really matter because it was usually like inconsequential things, more or less. Tehlor Jenkins Reid wrote my favorite book of 2018, which was The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. I think I actually like this one more, which is shocking to say, and I feel really weird like picking a favorite between the two, but this one I was so invested in. I could not put it down, and I stayed up late to finish it and was sobbing at the end. Like, I was so heartbroken, but also just like loved it so much, and I was so sad it was ending. Like I said, I totally understand why some people don't like this. It is a book that doesn't work for everyone. I get that. But for me, it definitely did, and I really loved the atmosphere of the like 70s rock band. Like, they got into some shit. This is like very much sex, drugs, and rock and roll. So many content and trigger warnings for alcoholism and drug use and lots of sex. There's lots of profanity. Daisy herself has a lot going on, really deals a lot with like abandonment and feeling unloved and unlovable, and it was just it was a lot, but it was my favorite book of the year. I loved it so much. I'm sad that more people don't love it, but I get it. I think the TV series is going to do really well for this story. I think it will allow people who don't connect with the storytelling method that she uses. I think it will I think hearing the music and seeing like the stage and all of the drama, I think will just lend itself to a really good TV show, and I cannot wait to see it. I think it's going to be incredible. But I just love this so much. I think about it often, and I am so happy I read it. I was so nervous because I knew it was really polarizing. I was really worried I wasn't going to like it because I love Evelyn Hugo so much. But I loved it. I loved it so much more than I was expecting to, and I already like can't wait to reread it. It's just one that I will treasure. Also, my friend Coco gave this to me as a moving present, which was so sweet, and it's the beautiful UK edition, which I think is just so stunning. But alright everyone, those are my top 10 favorite books from 2019. Overall, pretty solid reading year. I think my average rating ended up being about a 3.8 across the 82 books that I read. I really adored a lot of the stories that I was able to get my hands on this year, but these 10 were really the best of the best. If you've read any of these, if you had any of these books on your top 10 list, let me know in the comments down below. I would love to hear how our lists overlap. If we have completely different lists, let me know what your favorite book of the year is, and I will definitely put it on my TBR if it's not already on there or if I haven't already read it. If you'd like to follow me elsewhere, you can find links to my social media accounts in the description box, as well as a link to my blog and Mike's books. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on my next video. But until then, happy reading. Bye!